Thanks a lot, Artemis, for the kind introduction, and thanks to TechIsland for hosting that webinar. My name is Panos. I'm the CEO and co-founder of MOVEO.AI, which is essentially a company that's trying to push GenAI for the enterprise. A little bit, a few things about me before I get started. I'm an engineer by background, by training. I spent more than 10 years in the United States as a research scientist before starting MOVEO. With the vision of essentially putting GenAI with all the guardrails needed in these complex environments. So without further delays, let me start sharing my screen. And what we're going to do here today is essentially guide you through a little bit of how can GenAI get applied to customer experience. And basically do a little bit of a quick demo of how exactly, with a very concrete example, that technology can be applied through MOVEO's, let's say, interactive way of doing such an integration. So let me get started. And as Artemis said, if there's any questions at any given point in time, just raise your hand. We're probably going to be taking those at the end, just so that we don't disrupt the flow of the presentation. But hopefully we can get to all of these by the end of this session. All right. I mean, first thing I want to say is that it goes without saying that there is a huge need for a good customer experience. A good customer experience for any modern organization gets translated to an increase in customer satisfaction, gets translated into increased conversions, decreasing the customer churn. And at the same time, we see, as of recently, a very huge demand from end users for personalization during their actually their experience with the end business. And GenAI is that tool that allows personalization at scale. So essentially, what we're going to be talking a little bit about today is how we can use those smart chatbots like ChatGPT, to improve customer experience. Before I get started, let me just give you a very brief introduction of the current landscape of chatbots. So most of you have experience with systems like that, and it might not have been the best, especially if it was in the past, like even like 4 or 5 years ago. But essentially, this trend started more or less around 2014, where we have the first chatbots popping up, and those are systems like HubSpot and ManyChat, where it's mostly clicky. It's like buttons that you have to specify flows. And the moment you deviate from the happy path, really the system breaks. And then you have the next, let's say, kind of generation of chatbots, which is also what I heavily worked at while I was in the US, which is those chatbots that we call NLP chatbots, like natural language processing chatbots. It's better than before. There is some AI there. It's much more resilient to typos and mistakes that people make while expressing their problems, but still there is a high maintenance cost, and you have to, let's say, map out all the different scenarios through your dialogue tree, and you have to think about all the problems and all the questions that someone could ask beforehand. Then the black swan event happened, which is the ChatGPT, and everybody got a glimpse of how LLMs, generative AI technology, can be used for customer experience. So after ChatGPT, you have, if you look at the landscape right now, you're going to see that you have a lot of different systems that essentially the value prop is chat with your documents, right? You have unstructured data, data that reside in your knowledge base, your PDFs, your Word documents, and so forth. And you just, you can just upload them. And those systems, most of the times, are thin wrappers on top of OpenAI. They ingest your documents and they call OpenAI trying to synthesize a response from those documents. The biggest drawback that we see using those types of systems is their inability to connect to APIs, and the fact that a lot of these systems are now private. So they reuse the data for training, let's say, their own systems. So there is a risk of IP theft and IP loss. But most importantly, I would say it's the inability to connect to APIs. And by APIs, I mean the inability of such systems to connect to live data that constantly change. Where we come in to bridge that gap. We're trying to as a system that gets the best of both worlds, in the sense that we have GenAI on the one side, and we believe that that's really the future, to be honest, to have GenAI on the one hand, but also being able to blend that with access to APIs, where basically that allows the virtual agent to perform concrete tasks. It might be in the form of a workflow, for instance, like someone needs to sign up or needs to cancel a reservation at a restaurant, or he's asking about his withdrawal state from the bank. So ChatGPT has entered into the customer experience landscape, that's for sure. And I believe most of you have seen what Klarna has done, which is really great. And it's a first step of, let's say, adopting GenAI into a production setting. Even though Klarna used ChatGPT out of the box, there is also a descent. Nevertheless, some of the more verbose claims that 2/3 of all customer experience chats were resolved, and everything got resolved in under 2 minutes and stuff like that, just with calling OpenAI, I personally believe it's blatantly wrong. It might be out there for marketing purposes, because when we put Klarna's AI system to the test, we saw all the pathologies, right? All the problems that just using ChatGPT brings. Essentially, it's extremely slow. You can look at the second screenshot that it breaks most of the time. So those are timeouts. It's not really like it's a glitch that happened once. ChatGPT takes more than 15 seconds to reply in some cases, especially if the response is quite big. The worst thing, in my opinion, though, because some of that stuff might get improved in the future, is the fact that ChatGPT by itself, without, let's say, a little bit of the guardrails, a little bit of the magic of constraining those systems, can hallucinate. And there was a very famous Twitter thread on the right of that screenshot that people were getting Klarna's AI assistant to write Python code. Now, if you can get it to write Python code, you can do much more stuff with it. You can make it say stuff that it doesn't have to say, or if it had access to APIs, like transferring money or resetting someone's balance, that would be a disaster. So even though I believe GenAI should be adopted for customer experience, and it does solve a lot of the problems, especially around customer support, it has to be done reliably. And a little bit of the history of why we think that ChatGPT cannot just be everything for everybody alone, right? Because if you look at it from take a step back and you look at it from a different point of view, ChatGPT can solve logic problems, can write poems, can help you write an email, and can also help your customers answer a couple of questions. It's too good to be true. And it is actually the case that ChatGPT, when it's actually put and tested in an enterprise setting, it does fail. And we have the scar tissue by now, because we as a company also started using it heavily with some of our enterprise customers, but we have the scar tissue now and we know better. So some of the common problems you're going to see with ChatGPT is that, just listing here a few that most customers have ambiguous input. With ChatGPT, you're going to get this huge if-then-else list of enumerating essentially the different cases that something can go wrong. Most of the times, not I mean, let me not most of the times, but many times, it's possible to hallucinate. And most importantly, for customer experience, personalization is a key aspect. The fact that ChatGPT is going to give you the vanilla response. As of my knowledge of 2023, I don't know what happens in Ukraine, for instance, right now. That is quite a problem. On top of that, privacy is actually a big issue that we see enterprises are very concerned about. And here's a little bit of the examples of what I was mentioning before. So if most of the times in customer experience and in customer support, more specifically, users are not going to come up and say, exactly what's happening, right? Most of the times it's going to be something very vague, like it doesn't work for me. I tried it. You told me a million times to do it, but it doesn't work. It's going to be like a complaint like that because people are contacting you because something was wrong or they have a question, but they don't really know how to phrase it. When you try ChatGPT out of the box, maybe you integrate it with maybe your knowledge base with some plugins. The response you're going to get in cases like that is going to be a huge list of if then else. If you're more than 18 years old, then that's why your account was blocked. If it's if you're less than 18 years old, then a huge list that most people are not going to read, and they're going to ask for a human immediately. So by being specific to customer support, we have trained, let's say, the approach that we have taken, we think is the future as well in customer experience, is to be able to train LLMs that are much smaller than ChatGPT. You don't need, let's say, 175 billion parameters to do customer experience. You need smaller models that are much faster, but that also have the traits of the good traits of customer experience, which is short answers to the point and being able to ask disambiguative questions. At the same time, a system that is designed for customer experience, it has to offer personalization. And that is a huge roadblock when you try to use an LLM by itself, because by design, LLMs always have a probability of hallucinating, right? So the moment that an LLM is able to connect to third-party systems so that it can actually resolve problems that needs access to, let's say, your CRM, your database, or whatever API you have out there, is going to be limited to answering close to, it ranges, okay, depending on the industry, but close to 15%, 15 to 35% of the questions that pop up. Those are usually the how-to, unless let's say you're a super new company, but and people have a lot of questions about your offering. But most of the times, it's about me. It's about me that I try to deposit money, but it didn't show up, and you have to tell me what's up. So those are the kind of questions that don't exist in documents, and the ability to connect to those systems, to those APIs securely, reliably, is something that a platform that tries to push GenAI for enterprises needs to take into account. Finally, there's always the sensitivity issues of IP loss. Using OpenAI out of the box. It used to be less private. Now it's more, but these things do change. Azure has done a much better job at protecting, let's say, the data. But still, if you try to sign a custom DPA with Azure, or even going beyond DPAs, like an SLA with Azure, is going to be impossible. So that's where we see some of the market leaders, pushing back when trying to adopt GenAI, because it's one thing that you don't want to wake up one day and see your data being available for someone that is smart at prompting GPT. And at the same time, you want to have a system that comes in with the highest SLAs that a company like possibly a big bank requires, because those systems, from our experience and from the clients that we have been working with, are in the critical path. We have companies that, from past experiences, they accept hundreds of thousands of sessions of users talking to them per week, where if a system like that is down, which is what happened with OpenAI in November, I think 17th, and it was down for 3 days, it's bad. Okay. Here's some real world use case examples that I'd love to talk a little bit more about. Those are stuff that we have implemented, but it gives a little bit of, it triggers your appetite mostly on what is possible with GenAI and what are some of the leaders in the space doing. So Betano is an example that is one of the biggest game tech companies right now in the world, and it's providing a personalized service to its members, where they can ask anything about withdrawals, KYC, bonuses, and things like that. Banking, we see a huge adoption there as well. We work with some of the largest banks in the industry, Viva being an example, a recent one, that basically the virtual agent is there to answer all sorts of questions around, problems with POS machines, or KYC and so forth. Scrooge, which most of you are probably very familiar with, especially in Greece and Cyprus. But for those that don't know, Scrooge is like the Amazon of Greece. Where again, we see hundreds of thousands of people talking to the virtual agent per month for different types of questions, like payments or faulty deliveries or redelivering packages and stuff like that. And last but not least, we have another use case here about Allianz, which is on the insurance industry, which is traditionally less people less contact heavy. You don't talk to your insurance every other day, but still, even for Allianz, we've seen a very good application where there are different personas talking to the virtual agent. So you have agents, insurance agents, you have end customers, and Allianz is managing those quite effectively through the use of a virtual agent that offers instant support for accidents, for stuff that require immediate attention, that can happen at any given time, right? Even on a Sunday night. Last but not least, we see GenAI being adopted when it comes to customer experience, that is in multiple touch points. So the most obvious one is customer support, right? But people come to you and they have a bunch of different questions about maybe your product, or they're facing difficulty doing something on their account. Then you have the less obvious ones that we have seen quite a big adoption, which is lead generation purposes, and then you get also lead generation and marketing are kind of combined, where you can push a lot of messages, but now your campaigns stop being that static CTA, click here to fill out a form, and then that lead gets created on your HubSpot, let's say. Now the campaigns on Viber are much more interactive. The CTA is talk to us. Hey, here's an amazing deal for you, right? Open an account today and you get XYZ benefits. And people can start asking, does it apply to me? I have 3 kids. What are the benefits I get for this and that? So we've seen use cases for this popping up a lot, and improving customer experience a lot. And then you have the internal use cases. Internal, I mean, for big organizations, you have GenAI assistants to help, let's say, the employees in a company ask a couple of questions like, yeah, we've seen companies even having, let's say, the menu in a chatbot that people can ask what's on the menu today on the company's restaurant, or even they can ask about their days off or stuff like that that are quite complex that maybe an HR department needs to handle. And as of lately, we've seen quite a big push as well, specifically for the e-commerce space. So far, and let me just give you a little bit of context here, and I'll delve into that a lot more of how GenAI improves the customer experience, specifically for e-commerce, is that for the first time with that type of technology, AI assistants can be used for increasing conversions. Before, it was mostly pre-purchase and post-purchase, right? Pre-purchase is, what are the shipping costs? And post-purchase is, I received this item, but it's faulty, or it's missing, one of the items that my order is missing one of the items that I ordered initially. But what happens during purchase? That's a very interesting use case, and that's where the eloquence capabilities of GenAI can be used extremely efficiently. If someone were to say, train a system to behave like a very good persuasive seller according to your company's manuals, right? Here's some examples, and we have added here QR codes that you can scan at any time, and you can, let's say, see some of those examples. So this is just a simple one that we added from Stichiman, where there is a market that's really a marketing bot, where you can make predictions. You can make predictions about the soccer games of, let's say, the next week, and the winners get awarded like free bets and things like that. So everything happens through Viber. You get a push notification once you are one of the top 100 people that your predictions were correct for the most part. That's another example here for lead generation, where basically here you can answer to questions about how a program works, but also you can create a virtual agent that accepts leads for you and asks users to maybe even fill out a form as a kind of one-stop shop solution that you can chat, but at the same time you can also fill out a more elaborate form where there's validations with your social security numbers, and things like, or CPF for Brazil, let's say, or AFIMI for Greece, and so forth. So you can make a case where user starts in the chat and finishes everything within one system without having to transition into a different place on your website, for instance. And last but not least, I think that's a very interesting use case. What I was talking before, which is the e-commerce use case. And here we have an example that you can try out, and then you can type anything you want. And I encourage you to do so you get a little glimpse of what I'm talking about how GenAI can be used for selling, right? And obviously, this is still a little bit of a work in progress, but we have customers already in Canada and Greece using that system. And what we have seen is that some of the best drivers to close a sale are the product reviews and the product specs and the price history and stuff like that. So that system is specifically trained. Is not using OpenAI. Is using an LLM that we created. Is not using OpenAI because we wanted to make that LLM behave as a seller. And obviously, this is something that we created in that demo, I mean. But it can be much more, it can be made, we see a lot of potential in the sense that it can be made much more specific. Once you have your manual of how you sell, then that can be incorporated, and that happens with the click of a button quite fast. This is another very, very promising use case of how GenAI can be used specifically for e-commerce. Let me give you a little bit of a background of how those system works. Okay, if you're thinking about adopting GenAI, I think what you have to look for is for the platform approach, because you can do a lot of stuff using APIs. You can connect to OpenAI. You can maybe get to 70% of where you want to get to. But then you also have to think about the maintainability aspect of things. Like how does this thing improve? What happens if it makes a mistake? How do I correct it? Do I need a developer next to me all the time? How do I see my analytics? What happens with the customer satisfaction ratings? How do I connect that to Viber, WhatsApp, and my website at the same time? Things like that a platform that has circled the problem can actually answer for you. And at least what we have seen as general principles, is that you have basically the GenAI components blended with a little bit of workflow management in the sense that you can not only reply to FAQs, to study content, to how-to, but you can also create elaborate workflows. And by that, I mean, when a user wants to sign up, you need to ask him a couple of things, validate his social security, and then send him an OTP password, and then maybe reply to him about his balance, right? So that stuff, what I just described, is it's a desired behavior of a virtual agent that happens, that's not described in a document. It's a process, right? You have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and you cannot go to 4 if you don't complete number 3. So how you do that? How you do that easily without having to code, and how you do that while at the same time connecting to your systems so that you can get live information, is something that a platform covers. So as a last kind of step, what I wanted to do is go a little bit through of a live demo of how, let's say, you would create a virtual agent. And I'm going to be using our platform to do that as a quick example. And I think that's going to allow you also to have a much better understanding, more concrete at least, of how things work at a more practical level, let's say. All right. So I'm here. I have created a small account called TechIsland, and I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of how this thing works. But what I was saying before is, let's try to create a new collection. For MOVEO, a collection is essentially whatever you want to dump inside. It can be your website, your PDF documents, and stuff like that. But how would you do it? You can do, let's say, a test one. It doesn't really matter. But the way it really works is that you just go here. You specify what types of documents. Maybe you have a knowledge base, or it's just a website. And just for the sake of this very, very quick demo, you can say, okay, ingest MOVEO's website. We allow MOVEO to ingest MOVEO. So this is essentially a little cyclical. But what's going to start happening right now is that you're going to see documents popping up, right? And those documents are the pages from our website. So I'm ingesting everything that's in here so that I can ask, let's say, maybe a couple of questions. Now, the moment I do that, right, and it's the easier process, I can even go here, I can add a couple of documents while I wait for this thing to finish. But essentially, without, let's say, waiting 5 or 10 minutes for this thing to finish, it happens once the first time. We can just go here, and I have created a test, and we can go and test it out. So, the moment you type hi, you get a response, very generic response. Hi, I'm a virtual assistant. And you can go and change it, right? And it doesn't have to be so generic or vanilla. But if you ask about pricing, you're going to see, sure, MOVEO offers these plans, right? And those are the web pages that it considered before giving you kind of like the response. synthesize a response from that. Now, you might have maybe, what I was preaching before, right? It doesn't work. Like, what doesn't work? The MOVEO is a huge system, right? So the ability for an LLM to understand, like LLM is the technology behind GPT, right? The ability for such a system to understand that, okay, it doesn't work. It can be many things that don't work. It can be that he cannot log in, he stopped receiving messages, he has a problem with his payment, right? It can be many different things. Instead of like enumerating all those different things that are maybe the most common problems, and we have documentation for all that, so it has access to it. It just tells me to clarify. And maybe, I can come up with a more specific kind of a little more details, right? So could you provide more details about this, your experience? This will help me assist you better. This is important, especially when it comes to customer experience. Short answers, to the point, and disambiguating when something is annoying. Maybe you can say, Viber stopped sending messages to my virtual agent, or something like that. And if we have documentation for this, I'm sorry to hear you're having trouble. First, can you check if the Viber integration is active? And I don't want to go into the specifics of how MOVEO works, because you can disable or enable integrations, but essentially this is giving you a little bit of an understanding of, guiding a user from a very, very vague question to, drilling down to exactly what is happening. And we believe, in general, if you look at it from a macroscopic kind of view, that the future in GenAI, regardless of customer experience, is there's not going to be one system that rules everything. There's not going to be, ChatGPT is amazing. It is truly amazing. I use it every day for synthesizing emails and for helping me with different tasks. The moment you go enterprise, though, and the moment you want to be a master at something, that might be customer experience. It might be, let's say, medical imaging. It might just be something else, different trades. What I believe is the future, and that's subjective, of course, is that we're going to see the emergence of vertical specific large language models. And those models will be able to, let's say, help you with specific tasks, but do it extremely well. It's essentially of, how technology might unfold in the next couple of years. And we are big believers of just knowing how the internals of those systems work. We're big believers that the future lies with smaller LLMs that are specific to fine-tuned for specific tasks. All right, and then getting back to it, I think we wanted to leave about 20 minutes or so for questions. If there are any, I'd love to take them. I hope you enjoyed the session. I don't think there is anything else I wanted to add from our side. I've been talking a mile a minute, so I'm just gonna pause for a little bit and accept any questions you guys might have. Remember to raise your hand, otherwise you won't be able to type. So that's something to do if you want to ask a question.